It's been a while since I've been up here, so I'm hoping to remember how to do all this stuff. John asked a couple months ago, we talked about it, and he was going through his teaching, and he was gonna build up to the tabernacle. And as he's touched on it last week, he wanted me to do a teaching on the two arks, and I don't know when I did it. I was trying to, wasn't dated on my paperwork, but it's been a while since I did it. But anyway, during this time, I started looking at this in a different light, not because it was something different, it was just something that hit me that throughout the scriptures, there's a continual picture of everything that's at the beginning all the way to the end. You know, you can start out in Genesis 1, and in the beginning was the Word, and we get to the Aleph Tav, and the Aleph Tav is the Word. The Aleph Tav is the first and last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, all right? And he had to have words, he had to have letters to make words, so that he could put these words into a language that his people would understand. He had to have a way of doing this. So when he created that alphabet. So every time you hear it, I don't know how many times, I didn't count it in the Torah, but it says Yahuwah spoke, and usually it was to Moses, or it was to Abraham, or to Jacob, or Joseph. But when he spoke, it says, speak to the children of Israel. So who was really speaking? He was talking to Moses when he said, speak to the children of Israel. But in reality, he was speaking. It was his words. He put the words in the language there for them to teach. So when you go through the scriptures and you see the Aleph Tav, you can see Yahuwah's word. And if you see Yahuwah's word, you see Yeshua's word. Because Yeshua came as the Word. He was the manifestation of flesh of the Creator. So when the Shema, when it says Yahuwah is Akkad, not meaning just one, but a unit, or a unit of one thinking, or one line, or one thought process. So putting that into it, I've started thinking about what a witness. The Aleph Tav, a witness, okay? And so all the way through the scripture, we have this witness. When we get to, say, the second chapter, and we go, and he's starting to talk about the garden, he has a couple of specific things there. He's talking about the rivers that come into the garden, like living waters, but he also come and he speaks about the gold and the stone, the Shoham stone, which is translated as onyx. And I got to thinking about it. Why is that important to have that there? Because it's put there, and it's got a name behind, it's got a Hebrew number behind it, onyx stone, or the Shosham stone. If you look at that, and remember I did a teaching a few years ago at the request of Alan and David. We were talking about, I brought up the question one time, why is it so important that he always talks about the stones unhewn, everything had to be in its natural state? It's because he created it. He didn't want it up. He didn't need to alter it to make it better than what it was. So when I was doing that teaching, it's the stone is Aleph Bet Nun, which is Aben or Banan, however you want to pronounce those letters. But when you look at it, a very simple translation, or looking at that word, is the Aleph Tav is the strength and the foundation, or the Father. And the the Bet, is a house, but it's also BN is the Ben, the Son. You got the Father and the house, and then you have the Nun, which is about procreating. It's about generations. It's about gestation, okay? It's a picture of a fish at times, because fish are very fruitful, and thousands of eggs and thousands of fish. So when you look at that, you've got that stone, and it's a picture of the Father with his Son that is the house, with his children in that house. It's a picture of his creation. It's a picture of the kingdom. It's what he wants in the kingdom. It's his kingdom, his house, and he's going to cover it and protect it, everyone in it. And everybody's going to be in unison. It's about his chosen people being put in there. Just that one word. So going along with that, and I'm trying to make a point about witnessing, because we can read the scriptures and we can have people tell us what they say. I'm not trying to tell you what anything says in the scriptures. That's for you to read and understand. But when you start reading and in the depth where you start looking for these pictures and patterns, when you get a little farther down the line and he gives you, when he starts building his family, he starts with Seth and he goes through the genealogy of Seth all the way up to Noah. After the flood, he gives you Noah's generations, takes you up to Abraham. It's a pattern of how he's building his house. This house is not a house, it's people. And the house that he's building is the kingdom for those people, if you want to look at it that way. So it's not only just a house, it's a people. There's something that comes up in there, and when he's talking about, he gets to a point where he says, and all the world had one language. We all know what that is, right? And they were decided to build a building out of clay, bricks, and raise it up so that they could esteem themselves and raise themselves up into the heavens. Thinking of that, and I wish David was here because we had a long talk about this one time. The tabernacle is a man-made thing, and that picture of that Tower of Babel is a picture of how man generated itself into thinking that they could be like the Creator, and they started building things. He has a building of a family and a house. They were trying to build a building with blocks, bricks, and raise it up for a structure for themselves so that they could be like him. Basically, that's what they're doing. So when we look at that, that's a picture of mankind and how they treat the Creator's words, how they've done it over the centuries. Now, this is just my opinion. This is the things that, and I've read it and studied it and looked at it, and what I see is a future picture of what man does to make their event of the tabernacle, building a temple, okay? Well, all of this comes about when I'm going to do a study on the two arks, okay? And the two arks, when you look at it, are two witnesses. One of the witnesses is the ark of the testimony or the ark of the witness, depending on which scriptures you're reading, but I'll use the ark of the testimony or the witness, either one at different times, but it's the same ark. It's the ark that's it's laid over with gold. John went through it last week. It has a lid on it. It has the mercy seat. It has the cherubim on it. It's all built and it's overlaid with gold. And it has 3 items in it. That ark is the ark of the witness. It had the ark, the first mention of witness is in chapter 16 of Exodus when it talks about the manna. And he instructs Aaron to take some manna and put it in the golden urn as a witness, or to put it in the witness or set it at the witness. We didn't even have the Ark of the Witness yet. We didn't even have the discussion of the tabernacle yet. We didn't have the discussion of what was going on other than they were getting out of Dodge and headed for the mountain. But anyway, that witness was the first suggestion of a witness. And the second one comes in 25 or 30 in that area when he talks about Moses going up to the mountain and bringing down the tablets of the witness. He gave him 2 tablets with what he called the witness on it, which is the 10 Commandments, okay? So that's the tablets of the witness. And we know what happened. The people were having a party. They were celebrating a feast to Yahuwah, and they had a golden calf that Aaron explained it, that just popped out of the fire. But we all know that he molded it. But so even Moses or even Aaron could tell a little fib now and then. But anyway, that witness, when he threw those tablets down and broke those tablets, it was a picture of the people that had broken the commandments, they'd broken the vow that they made. All you say, we will do, just a few days earlier. Mm-hmm. So when those tablets hit the ground and broke, Moses broke them, but they were broken by the people because of the displeasure of Moses and the breaking of them. But so where would those tablets be? They were a witness. They were cut out by the Creator, and they were written on by the Creator. And I don't think Moses or anybody left them lay in the dirt out there in the desert. They were picked up and they were put in the witness, which we know in chapter 40 when Moses is doing the final steps of the tabernacle. He put those witnesses in there. He had the manna and he put the witness of the tablets in there. They put the lid on and it was covered. Now, that ark was only seen by two people other than the man that made it. It was Moses and Aaron, because it was, once they had that ark made, it was, the stuff was put in, the lid was covered, and they covered it with a canvas before they even put it in the tabernacle, and they built around it, but it was covered, and then nobody ever seen it after that except the high priest and Moses. And remember, Moses was of the high priest. He was of the priestly order. Now, he was never looked at as the high priest, but he was the one that was giving the directions to the high priest. Mm-hmm. Creator never talked to Aaron directly, and you can look in the scriptures and you see that when Aaron and Miriam and Aaron were kind of chit-chatting about why Moses was so special and they were second class or whatever, and he even told Moses, he said, I don't talk to you. I talk to Moses as a friend, face to face. I talk to you in dreams and visions, okay? So we know that when he talked, Moses was the only one that talked to him. Mm-hmm. And we know that this time that Moses was there, he had to go in one other time to put the rod of Aaron in there, which was the rod that bloomed when people were complaining about the people, or complaining about Moses and Aaron, and why are they so great? And it was, we should be there. So they had all of them bring their staffs, one from each tribe, and they laid them out on the ground, or gave them to Moses. They put them in the tabernacle, and the next morning, Moses' rod bloomed with blossoms, with flowers, and with fruit on it overnight. That was the proof, and that was put in the ark. And when the testimony to that is all the way into the New Testament in in Hebrews, and it talks about the setup of the tabernacle, and it said the only thing that was in the Holy of Holies was the ark of the witness, the ark of the testimony, that had the rod of Aaron, the witness, and the manna, and it was set in front, and it was set in behind the curtain with the altar of incense right inside there, okay? And if we read that, so there's teachings. Today, people will say, well, a priest could only, I've heard of 100 times different people teaching, priest could only go in once a year, so nobody ever went in there except once a year. That wasn't true, because in the setup of it, when he's talking to him, he says, and when they come to tend the lampstand, he will also set up in the morning and the evening attending the lamp. He has to also offer up incense. And so the priest had to go in every morning and every evening to offer up incense in there. But he could only come in once a year to offer blood upon the altar. Most of the teachings that I've heard out there is that when they brought the blood into the Holy of Holy place, they put the blood on the corners of the mercy seat or on the ark, but that ark was never in there. So there's so many fallacies out there that we follow over this ark of the witness, this golden ark. Even Ron Wyatt said he was under the tunnels under the mount, the mount over there in Israel, and he's seen it off in a distance, but he could never find it again. He never seen it because the Creator has it. He took it up. You can read Revelations, and you can see in Revelations where it's sitting there. But anyway, these witnesses are a picture of what the Creator has in mind for us. He has this Ark of the Witness, and it's got his witnesses that he's shown man who he is, what his power is. How could anybody ever do anything? There's no magician in the world that could make a rod bloom and put fruit on it overnight. It had to be the Creator that did that. There was the only one that could form those stones and cut them with his fingers and write on them in stone. That's his witness. And he has that right now. He's sitting above it with Yeshua at his right hand. Sitting there on that. If you read, I think it's Revelation 13 or somewhere in there, it talks about it. I got it down here. But anyway, my point is this. The arks are a witness, his witness, that he shows, he knows, and he can show his people, and someday maybe we'll all see him, I don't know. But this witness is here. This is what I wanted for you. Now over here, the Ark of the Covenant, the ones that he had Moses cut, he told Moses to bring me cut home 2 stone tablets, bring it up, and I'll write the same words on them, right? And then he told him to make a box. Deuteronomy 10, he says, make a box and put these tablets in it. And he tells you about how he did it. And he gave them to Moses, and they were put out in front. When Moses came back, and we read in Exodus, where he moved his tent out of the camp. Think about how big that camp is. You had a tabernacle that was built. You had Moses' tent and Aaron's tent in front. You had the tribes, or the priesthood, on 4 sides. And beside them, then you had 3 tribes, east, north, and south, and west, camped around it. This is a huge camp. He's out of that camp. He's not even close to it. He's outside the people. He's outside the priesthood. He's outside the people that are camped. The 3 that Yehuda had out in front, facing the east. He's out in front of that with his tent, and that became a tent of meetings. But we also know there's a tent of meetings inside the tabernacle, because that's where Aaron served him. The priesthood served him in the tent of meetings, the holy place and the holy of holies, or the most set apart place and the set apart place. So we have this picture of Moses, and in scriptures we read that in the morning they would watch the column of smoke go and move out and settle at the gate, at the door of Moses' tent outside the camp. And that's where he met with him. He met with Moses out there. If he was going to do something with the priestly order, was done in the tent of meetings with the high priest Aaron. Okay? So, looking at that, we have this thing out there. He had a young man named Husha, that he later changed his name to Yeshua, which is Yah's deliverance, and we laid it in the scripture as Joshua. He stayed in that tent and guarded that box no matter what. And whenever they left, whenever that column went up and left, that Ark of the Covenant, the one that was in Moses' tent, was carried by the priest following it 3 days ahead. If you read, it's 3 days ahead of the camp. And probably because it probably took 3 days to disassemble everything and get it going. We have a priestly order of how things were set up. So the Ark of the Witness was set there. They dropped the tabernacle down around it, and they covered it with a veil. And it was only carried by one tribe of the Levites. And it was carried by man. And just think about this. Go back and start figuring out how many shekels of gold that was put on that was hammered out, how much that thing weighed. And it never left the hands of those priests when it was moved. They didn't see it, they just had the handles, because they were never removed from it. So you had that ark, and you had all of the utensils, the menorah, the showbread table, and all the utensils that were carried by hand. The only things that were in wagons were the structures itself. So that's something that we really have to listen to and put into our brain, that this never left the center of that group of people coming out. And they had the people lined up just how they were supposed to be, everything. There was no way anybody could get close to that group of people, because they were surrounded by whatever you want to call them, the people, the priesthood and the people. So, but that Ark of the Covenant that was sent way out there, that would follow, and they would set it down, and then Moses' tent would be set up. The column would stay there, and they'd bring in, and that's where they set up the tabernacle. So we have to put these things in order, because if you look at people that look at the temple and what was in the temple and how it was treated, never came into in any context of the scriptures. Okay, to give you a point, that Ark of the Covenant was something when they went into Jordan, they had the priesthood walk out in the middle, and it specifically says the Ark of the Covenant, because they were the leaders. And the Ark of the Covenant set in the waters, and the waters parted. And they went through all of the things of the people moving and so forth, but the last thing that came across was the Ark of the Witness came in, and the tabernacle. And the people, they came into the land. The people went in first, but Yahuwah, the column of smoke, had already went in, but the water was divided by that Ark of the Covenant. So thinking of this, how much power is in that Ark of that Covenant? We know what the power of the Ark of the Testimony is. When the two sons of Aaron went in and offered up strange fire, they were smitten. I think David called it, they made toasty critters out of them, or crispy critters out of them. But they were not ordained, they were not given the authority to even go inside, yet alone to bring strange fire. Only Aaron could, only the high priest could do that. So when that happened, we know that just walking in there, they were struck down. So nobody could touch that thing. But we also know that when David brought the Ark of the Covenant in a wagon, and somebody tried to touch it, it struck him down. So there's power in that. We know that when they marched around Jericho with the Ark of the Covenant, 7 days they walked around, and they were walking with the priest with the Ark of the Covenant before the walls came down. There had to be some power in that. And every time they went into battle, they took the Ark of the Covenant with them. Not the Ark of the Witness, the Ark of the Covenant. It was like their bulletproof vest or their shield or whatever you want to call it, that the people understood that this was something special, but it was not the Ark of the Witness. It was a separate ark unto itself. All the way through the scripture, you can see the Ark of the Witness goes through the land into Shiloh, and they set up the tabernacle. That's where the tabernacle's final resting place was, in Shiloh or Shiloh. Now, you've been over there. Did you guys ever go up there when you went over there? Family? Well, they have a place that's marked out up there with rock, and it's exactly what the measurements of the tabernacle, the whole structure was, and they had the Holy of Holies set up where it was, and the holy place, and then the altar and everything. It's just got rocks piled up and it's got a lot of stuff there. It's got the wine presses where they press the oils to make the ointments, and where they made their burning their lamps and their incense and everything. So it's kind of interesting that we don't see anything about that tabernacle. It just went away. We get into the scriptures, and when we see when David became king, he had to, if they wanted to worship or do something, they had to go up to Shiloh to do it. But you have to remember that there was a lot of animosity between the northern tribes and the southern tribes at that time. And so David feared for his feared for himself quite a bit going up there. There was times when he went up and hid up there because he knew that the people that were looking for him wouldn't come up there because they were afraid of the power of the Israelites. You gotta remember how many more Israelites there were of the northern tribes than there were of the southern tribes. So when David went up there, anytime they did anything, they even moved the tent of meetings of Moses, it became Joshua's tent. They moved it to Gilgad or Gilead or something, and they went there for offerings, to do offerings and stuff. They quit going to the tabernacle. So the priesthood that was set up was still in effect at the tabernacle, and it never moved down to Jerusalem where they built the temple. So we know that they built this temple, and it was man's idea. If we read Samuel, we find out that first of all, the northern tribes came down and talked to Samuel about, we want a king. And he was pretty upset, but the Creator spoke to him and told him, he says, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me as their king. So I'm going to give them a king. He didn't say it that way, but I'm going to give them a king. So the first king he appointed was from the northern tribes. And that didn't work out too well because he didn't pay attention to what he was supposed to be doing. So Saul didn't obey, so he lost his king. David became king, but he was the first king of Judah and Israel. First he was king of Yehuda for 7 years, and then he became king of Israel, or of all of them after that. So he was actually the first king of Israel as a whole. Saul was just a king for the northern tribes. But David's the one that came up with the idea of building a temple. And we also know that the Creator was like, I never asked anybody to do this, I don't have one of cedar or anything. And basically he's saying, I don't need it, I don't want it. But David wanted it because David wanted it, and David had proved himself, although he did a lot of bad things, he repented and never did the same thing again. And that's a lesson for us today. Mm-hmm. We shouldn't be, and we still do, I know, do things that we shouldn't do, and then we talk about it, and I'm not going to do it again, and maybe a month later you do the same thing over again. I know, that's my life. I don't know how everybody else is, but I haven't got to perfection yet. But anyway, when David wanted that tabernacle, the temple, he didn't let him do it. Everybody knows that Solomon got to build it. John covered it pretty good last week when he's talking about when they built the Holy of Holies, or the most set apart place. The thing that they didn't have a golden ark of the witness. They had a box with the tablets in it, and when they slid it in, they even make mention in the scriptures that they slid the Ark of the Covenant in through the veil, and they left the handles in, and the only thing that was in the box was the Ark of the Covenant, or the tablets of the covenant that Moses had. Okay, there was no lid on it, there was no gold on it, it was just wood. And it was slid in there, and then the curtain was pulled over it, or the doors, I don't know, I think it had curtains on it. And then they set up the showbread to the north, the lampstand to the right, to the south, and then they had the altar of incense out there in front. So when you see diagrams of the tabernacle, a lot of times they're going to show the altar of incense always out in front, out with the showbread and the lamp. But that altar of incense was always on the inside, because that's where he wanted it, and that's where they offered up the incense. And it was to come up to him each day, and each morning and each evening. This was what he told Aaron he needed to do. And when you read in Revelation, John even spoke about the altar of incense and then throwing the fire on, and were the picture of the prayers of the people coming up. So all of those things in there, huh?
So that's what Zechariah was doing when he was going in and it's in the beginning in Matthew or in Luke.
Well, he didn't have to go into the Holy of Holies because the altar of incense was out front. So he was doing the incense and lighting tending the candles, or tending the lampstand, the menorah, I guess you would do.
Wasn't he doing the incense?
Yeah, but it was outside it wasn't in the Holy of Holies, it was set outside. They had it sitting outside in front of it. Okay? So it wasn't inside where, like it was in the tabernacle. And that's why I've had some diagrams, I picked up 2 or 3 diagrams out of different scriptures, and they all show the tabernacle. You know, they laid the tabernacle out and they have all this stuff, and they always show the altar of incense in there with the showbread and the lampstand. Yeah. And it specifically says he played it. Remember what John said last week? When he was building the tabernacle, he was sitting there building it from the inside out. And the very last thing that he brought in was the altar of incense, and he placed it in front of the curtain that was in front of him. So if he's looking at that curtain in front of him, it's right in front of him, and that curtain was in front of him. So, and that was the curtain. If you were on the outside of it, it says was the showbread to the north and the lampstand to the south. And another thing, the menorah. We don't have any clue. That's probably a pretty good picture of a menorah because that looks like a bunch of tree branches. But each one of those had three cups on it with 3 flames. But it also had reflectors on it. And we've never seen anywhere where they talk about those reflectors. But they put the reflectors on it so it would shine the light across onto the showbread. So when you read it. It's got 3 buds, 3 bowls, and 3 lights. And a very interesting thing on that, when you look at that, with three lights on each branch and 4 in the middle, representing Yeshua, you have the 22 letters of the alphabet. Somebody else, I don't think, maybe it's Brennan that came up with it, and the one that has I'm trying to think of, anyway. It works out that way, but it does have 3, and they were olive branches. They look like an olive branch. And so we have these nice, well-formed menorahs, and they were never called a menorah, it was called a lampstand. So those lamps had reflectors on them, so it would push the light across to the showbread, because there was no openings there, they had a curtain there. So when that curtain was closed, the only thing they had for light would be the menorah. But anyway, all of these things that we look at, we've been taught through some of the ways that we keep our Passovers and the way we keep when we do tabernacles, we do all these appointed times. We have these different things that come into the picture. We have to remember that these are all things that man put in there. Okay, they were doing what the Creator said, but they were doing them like they wanted them to be. Okay, when those people built that tabernacle and they did the lampstands and they did the ark, it was exactly like what Moses was shown to build. And you remember, Yahuwah put that into the people that were building it. He put that into them, so they built it exactly. They had a photographic memory. They had the computer CAD layout of it in their head. So when the man did it the way they wanted it. So what did Solomon build first? He built his house, right? Then when his house was built, then he built the temple, and he gives you all the details of it, everything that they built, and they made the utensils for it. They didn't go up to Shiloh and get the stuff that was in the tabernacle. They made all their instruments, all their grates, their fire pits, everything they did, they made themselves. And I'm not saying, they were believing they were doing it the way it should be done. I'm sure of that. They weren't trying to just go, out on the limb and do what they wanted. They were trying to copy what they thought that had been described to them, because only people could guess what they looked like, because only the high priest and Moses and the person that built it ever really saw those things. And some of the priests would see the showbread and the lampstand. So when we're looking at these two arks, there are two witnesses. It's a witness by the Creator that's showing this is what man wants. I wrote you tablets, here's your copy. It's the ketubah, remember? It's the wedding vow that they broke, and he's got the broken wedding vows in that ark. And then he's got the ones that he gave Moses in that Ark of the Covenant. We don't even know where that's at. When Nebuchadnezzar came up and wiped out, and they burned everything down and they took everything out, the only thing you don't hear him taking out was the Ark of the Covenant. It surely wasn't the Ark of the Witness, wasn't there. But we don't know whatever happened to it, okay? Nobody can explain it. So when they came back and rebuilt the temple, and they were given some of this stuff back, maybe they would have that ark, but I doubt it. If Nebuchadnezzar was going to be the ruler, he doesn't want their God ruling over him or having their stuff. So that, I'm sure it wasn't there, but I don't know. It's not in there. But the one thing that we do know, that as a witness, that temple that they built, once it was built and it was dedicated to the people, to the world, as a house of prayer. And that's what it was built for. And then they turned it into a temple that housed all of the idols of all of his wives and all of the people, and they had put trees around it, and they were worshiping trees. They had the fiery snake, the bronze snake on the rod that they were worshiping. They had all the stuff that was, and they were always in that temple from the time Solomon finished it to the very end. And I think it was Hezekiah that pulled them anyway, that pulled everything out. It was the last it was. Let me look at it real quick. I wrote it down, but I left it in my other scripture. So it's in the last of Kings, 2 Kings. You got it? You're gonna look it up, John?
No,
Well, anyway, there was one king that actually went in and took all the idols out, cut down all the
I
trees.
think it was Hezekiah.
Huh?
I think it was Hezekiah.
Yeah, and he cleaned everything out. He was 25 years old, and when he became king, and he was the first one that cleaned everything out. So all of the years that we had, 40 years of good times and 40 years of bad times, or however it went, good kings, bad kings, and however things went, that temple was full of those idols and stuff. So when you think about that, how could that be an acceptable place for the offerings? And I'm not trying to put Yehuda down. Yehuda is very important, and we wouldn't have the scriptures if it wasn't for the tribe of Yehuda, period. Because they were the ones that kept it. What we have today, this is what we got from that tribe. But we have to remember that everything that's in there, man has put his thinking into it. And when we get into the New Testament, we see how they took what was really, they couldn't take the message away, but they've tried. But the real thing that they did was try to Christianize it, okay? And I'm not mean that meanly, I'm trying to use the right word, to make it fit what they believed at the time. And so over the centuries, we've seen it go whichever way man has ruled or became rulers, they've kind of changed it to fit what they wanted. The King James was written in English to teach people how to read. It wasn't even taught, they just used that because it was the first book that was mass produced, right? The printing press. So they were using it to teach people how to read the King James English. So I don't know how it worked out, but today we've got, 60,000 different religions out there in the world, and they're all made by man. But anyway, getting back to the subject of the two arks. These two arks are absolute witnesses pointing to what the Creator wants to give us, which is the Ark of the Witness, the tabernacle, pointing to the kingdom of heaven here on earth for his chosen people, those that say, all you say I will do. Doesn't matter what your bloodlines are, it's about those that will follow his word. Shema. Hear, listen, participate, do it, adhere to it, however you want to do it. And the other one is about what man has. And we see it today, the trouble that the world's in. Anyway, while we're doing this, we come into the fact that we have 2/10 of meetings. And so I think a 2/10 of meeting is almost a picture of all of the meetings in the world, all the tents out there, religions that we have in the world where people meet. And it's like he gave the place where the people were to bring everything to make their offerings, to where to have the priests worship him. You remember that the priests were there to worship and serve him, and then the people were to serve the priest. And this was our way of recognition or redemption or whatever you want to call it, to be in the kingdom, okay? So now we have Yeshua, who is the one that was made to deliver. That's Yeshua means Yahuwah's deliverance, or Yahuwah delivers. You could put salvation in there, but it's more about deliverance. It's about delivering the people into the kingdom. They have to be delivered in there, taken out of this world and delivered into what they want. So when we're talking about the two arks, we're talking, like I said before, 3 times now. It's about witnesses. And it's very important that we look at, when we're looking through the scriptures and we're reading the scriptures, that we're looking for these things that are witnesses. How many witnesses are in that book? In this book this is somebody, Brad Scott told me it was, who was it? No, it wasn't Brad. It might have been Rico. Told me it was the instruction manual, operator's instruction manual for a human being. I think Brad told me it was a love story. And I think that's what it is. It's a book of love, because who would want a bunch of people and keep that promise alive, which is part of that witness? The promises that he made Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he passed on to the children, are in that ark. That ketubah, that wedding vow that he made with the people that said, all you say we will do, is in that box. And it's the kingdom, it's the pointing to the kingdom. So we know, and we have to know, there should be no doubt in anybody's mind, that that kingdom is at hand, and that it's waiting for us, and it's going to be there. Now, where are we today? Somebody tell me where the world is today and which direction it's going. Because it's not good. And what do? Everybody's looking for one man to change, to fix it, right? And the other group is taking one, they want to keep one man there to keep it the way they're going. So here again, we're relying on men. We're relying on men. Going back to what this witness thing was all about. It's about what the Creator wanted and what man thought he wanted, or what they think he wanted, or maybe this is what we can do to show him that this is what we want, because that might be what he wants. You know, something like that.
Josiah.
Huh?
It was
Josiah? Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay. I guess Hezekiah was the last one, or one before. Okay, but anyway. So, we have this promise that was given to us, and it's still alive today, but yet what are we doing? We're doing exactly what the children of Israel did when they made the golden calf that caused the witness to be broke. They'd already broken it by having that calf built and worshiping that calf and calling it Yahuwah, right? But he's still there. He hasn't changed his plan. You've heard me. Nothing that I've ever read in the scripture changes anything. And it doesn't And I'm not doubting anything that the scripture says, but I'm trying to understand what the scriptures are saying and what it's trying to tell us. And these two arcs are a very important part of it. If we start understanding that, we can maybe start looking at everything that's in the scriptures in there. There's always another line over here in the beginning somewhere that relates to that same passage. Just like everything that Yeshua did came out of the Old Testament. It's just that the people that were into the new covenant weren't looking for something to prove the old covenant. They were looking for something new. So that's where we're at today. We have all of these different religions out there, and amongst ourselves, we have, I don't know how many different religions out there, but in this Messianic movement, if that's what you want to call it, or the Hebrew Roots movement, or whatever they call it out there, I don't know, I've lost track of it. But there's got to be probably 3,000 or 4,000 divisions, because I can see 50 or 60 right here in California on the high desert. You know, that people that have come here, and Valerie can vouch for this, and people that have been coming here a long time, we've seen groups of people come and go. And some of them was because they thought they got their feelings hurt, or maybe they didn't want to understand. Nobody ever was told to leave. Never heard anybody tell them they couldn't be here. But people decided that they couldn't be here because they didn't quite agree with what somebody said. And there was a lot of that. And so people came and they went, and those people are out there today. A lot of them are still in the high desert, and a lot of them are doing their own thing. Some of them have got big and then just went back, and there's just a small group like this, because all of that group decided they were smarter than the people that they were worshiping with or associating with, and so they just went their way. And they probably started big groups again, and they did it again and again and again. So some of them have moved down the hill. But this is all about what man thinks. This is why man has got that Ark of the Witness that we have, the Ark of the Covenant that we have. And we have a covenant in there. You can read it in the scriptures. It's the 10 words. We have that covenant. We have the promise of that Abraham gave, or that he gave to Abraham. It was passed on to Isaac, to Jacob, and then it was given to the house. The promise was promised to the children of Israel when they came out of Egypt. They went into the land. They couldn't keep it, but it's still there. It's never going to go away, and we have to realize that. So, but it seems like and I'm speaking from it seems like we always want to go to what man wants. And I'm just sitting there thinking about myself, sitting there watching the news, and I'm going, hip, hip, hooray, Trump. You know, I hope there's nobody in here who's going to throw a rock at me. But hip, hip, hooray, Trump. And then I sit there and I'm going, why? I'm like, why do we want to put our faith in this man? Because it's only for 4 years. And then what do we got? We got to do it again? We have this, it's permanent. It's always there. And so I think when I was doing this, reading this, and I started going through it, I had pulling all my stuff up from back when, and there's a little bit of all my talk, everything in there on the 2 arcs is all combined in these things. And the one I did on the stones and keep it simple sheep. All of these things are just like, if I could follow what I'd be telling people, really, you know, if I could really follow it, I think I'd be a pretty good person.
Well,
but I keep falling over.
But that's why we're here together.
Right.
Because this is our compass. This is our
This
is the light that lights our path.
That's the roadmap right there.
Exactly.
It is the light. And so, but I mean, I was just thinking, I was reading, I spent a couple of weeks going through my computer, and I've got letters that I wrote to inmates and giving them advice and telling them, you know, what this is about, how to, you know, you need to work on your relationship with the Creator and do this. And sitting there thinking about it. If I could do everything had taught and told people, I'd still be a sinner, but I'd probably be a lot better off than I am today. But I'm just saying that we need to understand that when we see things like two witnesses, with two arks, when we see a house that's being made out of clay instead of stones, what is the stones? We got a house that's built on a stone, right? Remember that, don't we? Build a house on the stone. And these guys are over here trying to build a house with mud and bricks. So where do you want to be? You want to be on that solid foundation with that house.
On that note right there, you went to the stones again. I was hoping you would. I want to share with you what Peter says in 1 Peter. The inner ring of Yeshua when he was teaching. In 1 Peter chapter 2, starting in verse 4. He's telling us to come to him, meaning Yeshua. Come to him as to a living stone, rejected indeed by men, but chosen by Yah, and precious. You also, as living stones, are being built up into a spiritual house, a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to Yah through Yeshua Messiah. Therefore, it is also contained in the scriptures, behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone, elect, precious, and he who believes on him will by no means be put to shame. Therefore, to you who believe, he is precious, but to those who are disobedient, the stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone, and the stone of stumbling a rock of offense. They stumble being disobedient to the word, to which they are also appointed. But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people, that you may proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light, who once were not a people, but now are a people of Elohim, who had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy.
Yeah.
Peter knew what you were
I'll have to
talking
mark
about.
that down.
What's that?
I'll have to mark that down and put it into that, because like I said before, when I never came, it wasn't that I didn't believe, it was just I didn't believe in churches, and I was kind of away from them. When I started doing this, it was kind of like a Lone Ranger thing, because I didn't really have an assembly, and a real assembly, until I came to Oak Pass back in 2004. And when I met Alan and Roberta and the family, and it was quite a group back then. And at first it was kind of, thought they were a little bit off, but as I got to know them better, they were, good people. I'll tell you that Alan was really one, he was a big inspiration to everything that I did, or everything I tried to do. But anyway, going back to that stone, an onyx, okay? An onyx, how many colors does an onyx have? They're black, they go from white to black. They have every color scope. When you're talking now, put this in the picture of a man. They have every range of color in there, from white to black, okay? Every one of them there's no two alike. They all have different lines and veins in them. They're never cut alike. In the raw, they never come alike. They're all different. They all have different, they're all subject to different climate things, okay? Because there's different ranges of them. It's almost like people, when you think about it.
But the complete range is made up in that one.
In that one rock. It's showing you the picture. That's why I said it's like people, because it's showing you, this is what I created, and this is what you're going to find in the world, and that's what we have in the world. And all different. Everybody has different needs, and there's no two people alike. DNA, right? Nobody has the same DNA. So when I looked at that, and the first time I taught it, it was more about people, but it wasn't people, okay? It was about looking at that stone, and it was about the Father, the Son, and the house, right? But that house is full of people. And so the other day when I was reading, I was going back and I was looking at that, I know onyx is not just all black, you know. And so I looked it up, and there are variation. In fact, if you Google onyx, Shohamstone or onyx, and they'll give you a rundown when they start running down all the similarities down it, matching up with people. You can go right down it, every one of them matches right up to people. It's almost like the creator wrote the script for Google or something. It's pretty interesting. So anyway, I'm just about done. This thing with this kingdom of heaven that we're pointed to is there. It's solid. It'll never go away. No, man can't make it go away. He said that there would always be a remnant, right? But he also says that the people that inherit that kingdom are going to be like the sands of the sea, isn't he? He's talking about the generations, and he's talking about the children from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that they were like the stars in the sky and the sand of the sea. That's the people that's going to be in the kingdom. We're not talking the whole world, we're talking the kingdom, where he's going to set it up in the promised land. That land that he promised Abraham is where he's going to set up his kingdom. So when we're looking at this little sliver of land that they're over there trying to defend, and everybody's coming down on Yehuda, sometimes you wonder, why does this stuff happen? Why are people that way? Why did we have all these protesting and crap going on with this and going against Israel? And you start thinking about it, it's like, man, we really have screwed up things on this earth. They're not just to blame, it's the whole earth.
Oh, yeah.
And so, but we look at, they're getting the brunt of it. That's all. They're getting the brunt because they're identifiable. The house of Israel should be thankful because he hid them in the nations. So
Our day's coming.
Huh?
Our day's coming. We'll be identifiable
yes,
one day.
because the whole world will know who we are. But anyway, I know I get repetitious on this stuff, and I get, a little bit going. But I think it's important, the way that I'm trying to get across to you is about reading the scriptures. And I know that every time I read it and I start really delving into it, something hits me, and it's like, oh man, I never seen that before. And so then I have to read it and study it to make sure I'm not just putting something there that's not there, But when you read for that type of understanding, it's not going to give us any salvation or any deliverance or anything, but hopefully it gives us enough understanding to at least know where we are in the world today. And I think that's important for all of us. So that's all I got this week, anyway.
All right. Thank you, John.
Yeah. So it's time to
Prepare our hearts to receive the blessing.
Yeah.